I don't want to be called a maniac. I agree. I am a rapist and a murderer, but not a maniac, said the suspect upon arrest. Rostov maniac Andrei Chikatilo, whose name is firmly associated today with the image of a serial killer, took the lives of about 50 people of different sexes and ages. It seemed impossible to even imagine a more terrible crime. But what the former forensic expert Serhiy Tkach, fired from the Russian police for forging documents, committed over 25 years surpassed all conceivable ideas of cruelty. All these years, law enforcement officers were looking for a sadist, a pervert, and a scoundrel. But he lived under the guise of a decent person. He worked, raised 5 children, loved his mother, was friends with his neighbors. And only from time to time did he throw off this mask to leave another bloody trail. A strangled child, the tortured bodies of teenagers, girls, and women. These atrocities, it seemed, would never end. According to preliminary data alone, 54-year-old Serhiy Tkach, who was detained in the city of Palahi in the Zaporizhia region, has more than 70 victims, and the investigation is still ongoing. In August of last year, in the village of Palahi in the Zaporizhia region, an inconspicuous elderly man was suspected of murdering and raping a 9-year-old girl, Katya. Before that, a whole wave of similar crimes swept through the regional center. Several girls were killed, 2 went missing, and 1 managed to survive an attack by an unknown man. But the criminal left no traces. And only after little Katya disappeared on the beach, her friends remembered that some grandfather was hanging around nearby, who even gave his name. Palahi is a small village, so the photo fit made by the police was first shown to a few enterprises, including ZAO Mineral. And they hit the nail on the head. One of the local residents recognized the wanted man as an employee of the Kalin plant pumping station and pointed to a nondescript, abandoned house on the outskirts where he lived. Still not believing in their luck and that the 2-year search epic was finally over, the detectives came to the rickety hut. And they heard from the gray-haired, broad-shouldered man who opened the door, "I've been waiting for you for 20 years. That's when the numerous crimes committed since 1981 in Crimea, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov, and Zaporizhia regions were connected. Dressed in worn-out slippers and an old vest, the elusive killer who had been terrorizing quiet Ukrainian cities and towns for 25 years stood before the police. In the 80s, he was called the Pavlograd Maniac. In Pavlograd, Dnipropetrovsk region, he was responsible for more than 50 murdered and raped girls. But he began counting his victims much earlier. A native of the Kemerovo region, Serhiy Tkach, the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine believes that there is no point in hiding the name and surname of this serial killer. So convincing is the evidence base of the investigative team, and the confession of the criminal himself appeared in Ukraine in 1981. His mother and brother lived in Simferopol, so Sergei, who came from the city of Kiselyovsk, Kemerovo region, first settled with them and soon got married. It is assumed that he committed his first murder in Crimea in 1981. Before he divorced his wife and moved to Pavlograd, he killed 4 more girls and women. However, the investigation of these crimes is still ahead. In the meantime, the investigative team of the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine, headed by the investigator for especially important cases, Justice Advisor Anatoly Shaida, has finished collecting evidence on 8 episodes recorded in the Zaporizhia region and moved to Pavlograd, where the killer left the longest and bloodiest trail. In the 80s, when murdered and raped girls began to be found in the mining town, an investigative team unprecedented in its number and composition was assembled here, about 600 of the best operatives from all over the Soviet Union, headed by Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine Mikhail Podobenko and Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine Ivan Gladish. They were top-notch professionals. This is how the investigator for especially important cases, Justice Advisor Anatoly Shaida, assesses their work today. And they did everything possible to catch the criminal. Why did he turn out to be elusive? We realized this only now. the guy who began his career in one of the mines of the Kemerovo region, who had served in the army, was accepted to serve in the Department of Internal Affairs of the city of Kisylevsk. Soon he was sent to study by correspondence at the police school. His work as a forensic expert became the basis on which he subsequently built the foundation of his crimes. It is not yet known whether this werewolf in uniform went on a terrible hunt in Siberia. Our Prosecutor General's office has not yet received a response to the petition for legal support sent to the Kemerovo Department of Internal Affairs. But it is already clear that an irresistible urge to kill cannot arise out of the blue, just because of a change in climate or place of residence. Tkach explains his crimes by the fact that in a state of alcoholic intoxication he had an irresistible sexual desire, says Valery Mirgorodsky, an investigator for especially important cases at the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Prosecutor's Office. And he drank a lot. He bragged that he could drink a bottle of vodka straight from the bottle in 13 seconds on a bet. But he cannot explain why in this state he went to look for another victim instead of his wife or common-law wife. The former forensic expert knew how to create an alibi and destroy traces of a crime. But perhaps the reason for such ferocity is different. Tkach, who is brought to Pavlograd almost every day to reconstruct the scene of the crime and other investigative actions, once let it slip, "I wanted to prove that the police don't know how to work." After 2 years of working in the Kisylevsky City Department, Sergei was fired from the authorities for falsifying the results of the examination. Since his first family, where a son and daughter grew up, broke up after that, he decided to go to his mother in Simferopol. And a few years later, he ended up in Pavlograd. Here, the murders of girls began almost immediately after his arrival. But having got a job at one of the mines, Sergei soon received an apartment and got married. How did he manage to slip through the thick sieve through which the operatives literally sifted the entire city? He rented out his apartment and lived with his wife in the suburban village of Verbki, from where he carried out his raids, says Anatoly Shaida. In this month, I can't bring myself to call him a person. He killed at least 3 girls, and he came under suspicion twice. However, each time he managed to wriggle out of it. And in principle, he does not look like a maniac. Calm, reasonable, pleasant in appearance. It is difficult to suspect such a person. Police Colonel Anatoly Belly, who in those years headed the investigative group of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Department of Internal Affairs, which worked in Pavlograd without leaving, told me after Tkach's arrest, "I am still tormented by the question of where we screwed up. I think the main miscalculation of the police was that they were looking for a brainless, frenzied maniac who acts chaotically and unconsciously, like a sleepwalker on a night of a full moon." Tkach himself tries to present himself as a victim of circumstances. When the head of the investigation team allowed me to ask several questions directly to the suspect, the most important one, "Why?" he answered, "When I saw the girl after drinking, I could not control myself. It was as if some kind of demon woke up in me. It was impossible to stop, but it seems he is being disingenuous." This man understood very well what he was doing, says Valery Mirgorodsky. He clearly prepared for the crimes. He always carefully destroyed evidence, leaving no cigarette butts, no food scraps, no bottles, no traces nearby. He even tried to remove sperm from the body so that it would be impossible to conduct an examination. You must agree that in a state of affect or severe alcohol intoxication, it is impossible to act so consciously. Today, he shows the scenes of his crimes without fail, although a lot has changed in Pavlograd over the past 20 years. He even remembers the angle of the descent to the shore along which he dragged the child. Once, right after committing the crime, the murderer, riding a bicycle, saw police officers coming towards him, and he abruptly turned to a nearby toilet. When the guards decided to check the identity of the suspicious cyclist, they saw that he was masturbating in the toilet. and such people, as a rule, are not capable of sexual aggression. And Tkach, as a former criminologist, took this into account, instantly inventing an alibi for himself. The second time, he committed the crime on the night when his wife was at work. And the woman, suspecting nothing, confirmed, "Yes, my husband was sleeping when I left." In addition, Serhiy had managed to change his clothes before the police arrived, and hide the things he had been wearing before. Neighbors considered Uncle Serhiy a kind person and even left their children with him. In fact, Serhiy Tkach attacked girls from behind, strangled them, and then raped them when they were already dead. He was afraid that living victims would be able to leave traces or identify him. Several girls survived and described the attacker, but the sketches were very different. One of them turned out to be so similar that a neighbor joked, "Well, Serhiy, you are a copy of a maniac." Outwardly, a strong, tall man with smart, bald spots and regular features did not look insecure. However, he had more than 70 victims. He himself said, "I don't feel sorry for them. At first it was scary, then I got used to it." Tkach valued his life. During investigative actions, he demanded a bulletproof vest and security. In the footage of the operational filming, he calmly demonstrated how he strangled the victims. His physical strength was explained by his past as a miner and athlete. He kept trophies, hairpins, watches, notebooks. He understood that these things could give him away, but he still carried them with him. The investigation found a match between the shoe prints and the evidence. Tkach liked to embellish the past, talking about imaginary wars and heroic scars. But his real pride came from memories of murders. He took offense at the word maniac and insisted, "I am a rapist, a murderer, but not a maniac." In his eyes, there was resentment for himself, but not for the dozens of ruined lives.